What if I told you Blake Baker owns Shane Beamer? Oh, you're going to love this. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Glad to have you aboard with us here. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, and of course on YouTube. So please subscribe. Today's show is brought to you by Ultimate College Football HC, a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Begin your coaching legacy today. The number one defensive tackle in the country, the number one player in the country for 2026 is staying in Louisiana. Shea Dixon reacts to that news about Jahkeem Stewart. Brian Kelly opens up about wide receiver 2 and the thing that LSU's passing game is actually missing. But I got to start with Blake Baker owning Shane Beamer. Oh, admittedly, until Tuesday, I didn't even realize this reality. But while Brian Kelly and the rest of the SEC coaches had their press conferences on Monday, Shane Beamer had his meeting with the media on Tuesday. And during that media availability, Shane Beamer was asked through 2 games how they can improve offensively. And let's be very clear. South Carolina was atrocious against Old Dominion. They won a home game 23-19. And it was ugly in every way ugly can be ugly. And if you didn't see the Kentucky game, you'd probably think South Carolina was awesome that day. They beat the Cats 31-7 in Lexington. Well, wasn't exactly the way that it played out. 31-10. Wasn't exactly the way that it played out. You see, that was a 10-6 ball game. 10-6 ball game at halftime. And the Gamecocks had just 105 yards of offense at half. Lenora Sellers wasn't very good. And the final score for South Carolina was a pick 6. It was a defensive touchdown. So it didn't even come from the offense. So let's just be very clear. That South Carolina offense isn't exactly awesome. They didn't exactly find themselves in Lexington against Kentucky. Well, Shane Beamer was asked how this offense can continue to improve. But it wasn't just big picture. He spoke specifically about this week and the defensive coordinator on the other sideline.
You got to eliminate the negative plays. We've had way too many negative plays in the first 2 games, and especially this week. You know, we're playing a defensive coordinator that was at Missouri the last 3 seasons and frankly embarrassed us the last 3 seasons with the number of negative plays. I think in 3 games we've had like 8 sacks and 24 tackles for loss, if I'm not mistaken, in the last 3 years. So the thing for us is we've had too many of those negative yardage plays on offense, and we certainly can't come out of this game on Saturday having 8 negative yardage plays. If so, it probably hasn't gone well for us on Saturday. So that's the good thing. I mean, that's the big thing. They're going to make some plays. I'm not saying that. I mean, they got really good players, so we're probably not going to have there's probably going to be some negative yardage plays, but we just can't have them where it's every possession we've got negative yardage plays. Just efficient runs. Not every pass is going to be a 50-yard explosive down the field, but just being able to have efficient passes and stay on schedule as an offense will be key this week. And that's, to me, that's kind of the next step that we got to get better at.
When he mentioned this defensive coordinator, now, in fairness, Blake Baker wasn't at Missouri for 3 years. He was there the last 2 years. Of course, Blake Baker was at LSU in 2021, then went to Missouri in 22 and 23, now back to LSU. He was spent 1 year at LSU before Brian Kelly was hired and, of course, wasn't retained. But let's dive deeper, shall we, into those 2 games that Blake Baker as defensive coordinator for Missouri went against this South Carolina team. By the way, a South Carolina team that had Spencer Rattler at quarterback. Whole different ball game than Lenoris Sellers. 2 years ago in 2022, Blake Baker's first season as Missouri's defensive coordinator. The Missouri Tigers were 4-4 when they beat South Carolina. They were 3-4 going into the game. Just 1-3 in the league. And Missouri beat South Carolina that day 23-10. Offense wasn't awesome, but let's take a look at what they did defensively. How about this? 4 sacks for Missouri and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 TFLs from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different players. 4 sacks and 11 TFLs. The 11 TFLs came from 7 different players at every level of the defense. Look, Isaiah McGuire was a really good defensive lineman. Became a high draft pick. He had 3 of the TFLs and 2 sacks in that game. He was awesome. But you may not know the name DJ Coleman. He had a sack and 2 TFLs. Tyron Hopper, a linebacker, had 2 of the TFLs. Martez Manuel, Ennis Rakestraw, a cornerback. Christian Williams, Joseph Charleston, a safety, all had TFLs. The point is, Blake Baker got super creative, and South Carolina never figured out where the pressure came from, and it netted 11 TFLs. So you'd think South Carolina learned their lesson, huh? Well, they go in 2023 to take on Mizzou, this time in Como, and Missouri put it on South Carolina. 34-12 was your final score in that game. And remember, you had Spencer Rattler at the helm in that ball game. And now look, they did eliminate the sacks and the TFLs. Only 2 TFLs, no sacks in that ball game. But what they compromised was their opportunity in not dropping back to pass. They compromised their opportunity to move the football. If you go look at the team statistics from that game a year ago, where Missouri won 34-12, South Carolina ran the ball. Oh, my goodness. South Carolina ran the ball 29 times for 69 yards. They had 50 yards lost in that game. So it'd be team total rushing how they lost, but lost 50 rushing yards. In that game, they threw for just 217. So total offense, just 286 yards, 286 for South Carolina a year ago against that Blake Baker defense. Point being, Blake Baker, in 2 years as the defensive coordinator at Missouri, put South Carolina in a 3-hour chokehold, embarrassed them with negative plays, lost 50 rushing yards in the game a year ago. So even though he may not have Isaiah McGuire, didn't matter because all of the stops came from a variety of players. They distributed the good times, as it were. I don't know which LSU players are going to be the ones that raise up and have a great day in Columbia on Saturday. But if history's any indicator, Blake Baker's creativity is something Shane Beamer and his staff are not ready for. In the last 2 years, Blake Baker's defense put it on South Carolina, and Beamer knows it. Now, I'll tell you, there's one matchup in this game, one matchup where it's good on good, and it's South Carolina's defensive line against LSU's offensive line. You may not know this, but through 2 weeks, South Carolina has 10 sacks. That leads the country. 10 sacks through 2 games. On the flip side, LSU through 2 games has not allowed a sack, which obviously also leads the country. So it's good on good. And Shane Beamer knows that as well.
They do a good job, I think, of mixing things up, Phil. I mean, they use multiple tight end sets, and they shift and motion and give you different looks, and they'll roll the pocket out a little bit to move the quarterback and get him on the edge. They'll keep tight ends and chip and then get out. And then certainly I'm sure they're going to feel extremely confident with their 2 offensive tackles of not giving them any help. If I'm not mistaken, the 66, the tackle, he's played 1,700 career snaps, and he's given up 3 sacks. So, I'm not great at math. What is that? Almost once every 600 snaps, he gives up a sack. So I'm sure he feels pretty good going into Saturday. And the sacks he gave up were to Jared Verse from Florida State, who's in the NFL right now, Will Anderson from Alabama, who's in the NFL right now, and a quarterback scramble. So, I'm sure they're extremely confident, and it's a big challenge for our guys, and I'm excited to watch Kyle and Dylan and the rest of our defensive ends, edge group, as well as our defensive tackles, how they combat, LSU's offensive line. Told them this morning in our team meeting, what an opportunity for our guys to get to go compete against what many say is the best offensive line in the country.
That's not coach speak. That's not, oh, gosh, golly gee, tough on us to have to go against Will Campbell. Shane Beamer's being sincere there, but he knows his guys are good too. And I'll tell you straight up, I don't think much of South Carolina. I think Lenora Sellers is not a good football player. Look, On3 had him as a top 10 quarterback in the country last year. I think he has the potential to be really good. He's 240 pounds and he can throw the ball a ton. He's just not a very good quarterback right now. He's a great athlete, just not a good quarterback, and he could become one. Rocket Sanders was a really good running back at Arkansas, had some injury issues, and I think he's proven he can be a good back at times. I don't think South Carolina's offensive line is very good. I don't think their defense in total is very good. Their pass rush is very good. And that's strength on strength, because LSU's pass defense is, or pass rush defense, their ability to pass block, I should say, is fantastic. So it's good on good. Do you trust Will Campbell, Emory Jones to hold up against South Carolina's pass rush? I do. And if LSU's offensive line can keep Garrett Nussmeier upright, LSU is going to sling the ball all over the yard. And on the flip side, you better believe Blake Baker is going to dial up some creative pressures to force that South Carolina offense into negative plays. A South Carolina offense that isn't very good to begin with, and a young quarterback. This is a matchup that heavily favors LSU. You go out there, you protect Garrett Nussmeier, and you protect the football, you're going to win this football game. I think Shane Beamer knows it as well. Okay. Brian Kelly, speaking of the passing offense, they've been fantastic. Garrett Nussmeier leads the country right now in passing touchdowns and is completing 75% of his passes. But the pass offense is missing something. And I want to talk about that something it's missing when we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Locked on LSU fans, want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're really going to enjoy. It's Ultimate College Football HC. It's an amazing game and simulation where you step into the shoes of a head coach. You get to lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the coach of the LSU Tigers? From recruiting players, hiring coaching staff, overseeing training camps, handling scholarships, you get to do all of it. You control every detail. It's all in your hands. And the thing that you might really love about this game, you are responsible for calling the offensive plays as well during the games. So your strategy determines the success of your football season. It's Ultimate College Football HC. It's completely free. It has no ads, is 100% playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want, when you want. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked on LSU fans. So use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk, as it'll get your team off to a strong start. So download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or just look it up on the app stores. It's Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. LSU's passing offense has been fantastic. Garrett Nussmeier is leading the country right now in touchdown passes. The offense has been otherworldly, 75% completions. Kyron Lacey right now is leading the SEC in most receiving categories as well. And we've seen LSU distribute the football. 10 players caught passes against USC. 8 players caught passes against Nichols, including 2 freshmen with their first career touchdowns, and Tradez Green and Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson, who had just moved to running back 3 days prior. He didn't have a carry, but he caught 3 passes, all 3 targets, and he got into the end zone. There's been a lot to like with this LSU passing offensive. Yet to give up a sack. Lots of good. There is one deficiency, however, and it's the true deep threat. That's what Chris Hilton has been, or was expected to be, for this LSU football team. And his injury has really taken that away. Now, they've got a lot of options, and Brian Kelly sort of sorted through who and how they're going to sort out that wide receiver 2 behind Kyron Lacey.
We just talked about Chris coming back. Kyle Parker's going to get in the mix here before it's all said and done. I really think that as we keep going, I know I talked about Sampson, but, we got to, there are the little things that he's got to continue to work on, but he's going to get some touches before this season is out. So I just think that there's more guys. As you know, Taylor's having a monster year for us right now, and I think that's going to continue. He's on the pace right now, Garrett, to throw between 45 and 50 touchdown passes. If we can continue that, if teams want to play us the way they are, he's a very talented quarterback, and we've got a lot of depth at the wide receiver position.
They do have a lot of depth, as we just mentioned. And it's not just that wide receiver. It's pass catchers. It's not just your receivers from Kyron Lacy and Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas and CJ Daniels. Yes, you've got tons of receivers, but you've also got pass catchers, as we alluded to. But what you're missing right now is the deep threat. Let me spell this out for you. And I know sometimes, if you're not looking at a chart, if you're just listening, numbers can be confusing. But so you don't have to memorize this. Just try to follow what I'm saying here. So right now, Kyron Lacy leads LSU at 13.3 yards per reception. Kamorian Pimpton has 14, but he's got only one catch. So it's one catch for 14 yards. So of the guys who would actually qualify, Kyron Lacy at 13.3, CJ Daniels 12.9, Aaron Anderson 12.7, Xavier Thomas 10.4. Nothing to sneeze at, by the way. Like, these are not Mason Taylor 9.3. I mean, everything what I mentioned there, except for Mason, you're getting a first down every time you complete a pass. But your high watermark is Kyron Lacy at 13.3. By comparison, a year ago, Kyron Lacy averaged 18.6 yards per reception. Malik Neighbors, 17.6. Brian Thomas, 17.3. Chris Hilton, 17.3. You see the point? The point is, you had the stretch the defense, the blow the top off of defense receivers a year ago. Now, much of that was Brian Thomas. Now, while Malik averaged 17.6, a lot of that for Malik was his ability to catch the ball, make a guy miss, break a tackle, and get upfield. Brian Thomas was the go route. Like, I'm running a corner and a safety straight out of the picture. You don't have that right now because that guy's supposed to be Chris Hilton. When you look at some of the offenses that have struggled, look, I can even look back to Brian Kelly's first year in 2022. Dre Jenkins averaged 15 yards per reception. But go back even further. Like, let's go back to 2020, right? The COVID year, but Kayshon Boutte was awesome. Kayshon averaged 16.3 yards per reception. That's a full 2 yards per reception more than Kyron Lacy right now. Dre Jenkins averaged over 17 yards per reception. Terrace Marshall, 15 yards per reception. You see my point? You had the ability to stretch the field. Now, the most absurd number ever is 2019 with Jamar Chase. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it slowly so it resonates. In 2019, Jamar Chase averaged 21.2 yards per catch, not per touchdown catch. Every time Jamar Chase caught the ball on average, it was 21.2 yards. Justin Jefferson was at 13.9. But you understand my point. Like, you have to have that guy that has the ability to stretch a defense. And that's the one thing right now in this passing game that LSU lacks. And it's the thing that Chris Hilton specializes in. Not only has he become a more physical receiver, but Hilton has the true game-breaking potential, the same way that Brian Thomas did a year ago. And Jaden Daniels, as we saw, became one of the most accurate deep ball throwers literally in the history of college football. Jaden completed almost 73% of his passes last year in an ungodly type season. But that's what LSU's missing right now. Listen, you can dink and dunk and slant and all that sort of stuff. And because Garrett Nussmeier has been so efficient and has protected the football, LSU has been able to work its way down the field even when it comes to the short passing game, using that as an extension of the run, which is fantastic. I fully endorse that, like we talked about in the last episode. For everybody wanting to see LSU run the football, I understand that, and I would love to see it as well, but not just on principle. You don't run into an 8-9 man box when you don't have numbers to do that. If they're going to show you a stacked box, you're going to throw the football against that stacked box and make them pay for crowding the line of scrimmage. But what you're missing is the ability to isolate and blow the top off a defense. You need Chris Hilton back for that. When Chris Hilton got hurt, Kyle Parker was supposed to be that guy. Kyle Parker got hurt against Nichols. They wanted Shelton Sampson to be that guy. They went to Shelton on the fourth play of the game. Deep ball down the right sideline. He caught it. He just caught it out of bounds. And that's kind of threw him out of bounds. So you got to be able to get that guy. And that guy is Chris Hilton. And whenever they get Chris Hilton back, it's only going to add another dimension, another layer, the singular missing layer to this pass offense. Hopefully, we see Chris Hilton back on the field Saturday against South Carolina. If not, then you really start to wonder when you get him back, because the next time you're really challenged after this weekend on the road in the SEC, the next time you're really challenged will be the home game in about a month against Ole Miss. We'll see if LSU can get Chris Hilton back before then. They certainly use him this weekend for the first road conference game of the season. LSU got some inadvertent great news. The number one player in the country for 2026 is staying in Louisiana. We'll explain. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel over the many months now that I've been here. It's America's number one sports book. Well, we have something a little bit different for you. Now through September the 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet just $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download America's number one sportsbook. Maybe that $5 bet, you want to bet on the Tigers. That number was 8.5. It's down to 7. A lot of money coming in on South Carolina. I don't buy it. I think LSU wins and covers. I don't think South Carolina's offense is any good at all. And I think LSU's offensive line is going to stonewall South Carolina's pass rush. And I think LSU is going to sling the ball all over the yard and embarrass South Carolina on Saturday in Columbia. So if you agree with me and you want to bet $5 on LSU to cover, even if you don't win, you're still going to be able to take advantage of this great deal. So go to FanDuel.com. Again, that's FanDuel.com to download America's number one sportsbook. That's FanDuel. On Friday, there was massive recruiting news when the number one player in the country for 2026, Jahkeem Stewart, the big defensive lineman out of St. Aug in New Orleans, announced he was leaving St. Augustine. Now, St. Aug is a great high school. We know Frank Wilson, of course, is a St. Aug alum, LSU's associate head coach and recruiting coordinator. And for as long as Frank Wilson's on staff, you would assume that any player at St. Aug that LSU wants, LSU's going to get. But Jahkeem Stewart left St. Aug because, as we now know, he has a strong desire to reclassify. So he's a 2026 prospect, which means he's in his high school junior season, but he wants to leave school after this year and play as a part of the 2025 class. So he wants to reclassify, graduate early. Well, St. Aug doesn't allow its students to graduate early. So Jahkeem Stewart left St. Aug. Now, according to Rivals, Stewart is ineligible to play this high school football season because we found out on Tuesday that Stewart is transferred to Edna Carr. The reason that's a big deal for LSU is there was a lot of talk about Jahkeem Stewart possibly going out of state to like IMG Academy potentially. Well, every Tuesday we visit with our buddy Shea Dixon from On 3 The Bengal Tiger, and Shea gave us his reaction and a full explanation of this Stewart situation.
Yeah, and like I said, we would have to wait and told everyone and to see where he would land. And for LSU, the hope was that you keep him in state, right? You didn't want to see him go to an IMG or somewhere where maybe you couldn't kind of keep an eye on things like you could when he's at St. Aug, and you have connections like Frank Wilson on staff who know everyone from the coaches to the guidance counselor and principal and janitor and everybody else. And now news breaking that he's going to be at Edna Carr. That certainly bodes well for LSU. This was the hope, is that he stayed in Louisiana. And not only does he do that, Matt, but he stays in New Orleans and in Edna Carr. If you were to ask me a school that they have more ties to in the greater New Orleans area than Aug, it would be what? Carr and maybe Destrehan, more Easton. So, yeah, seeing him land at Edna Carr, I think, is very good news for LSU. Now, like a lot of schools have connections to Carr, but Carr has been very good to LSU over the years, just as St. Aug has. So I think this is about as good of an outcome if you're an LSU fan or an LSU coach recruiting him as you could have gotten. But there still are so many unknowns here because at this point, as he pushes to reclassify, this is where this all began. You could not reclassify at St. Aug, which is why he pulled out, meaning he wanted to go from starting his junior year, but when it ends, reclassify, be in this current class, and go to college with this group of seniors. Again, couldn't do that at all. So he had to find the landing spot where he could. Car is a spot where you can go and take your courses and reclassify, but at this point, he is not cleared and is not now expected, it doesn't appear, to be able to play. He wouldn't be eligible this fall. So is he going to reclassify? As I make calls, I think they're trying to figure a lot of that out in terms of, okay, where's he at course credit-wise for graduating early? And many people think of, oh, well, these guys reclassify and then they become, early enrollees. Well, that's kids who are reclassifying as juniors, had already done it all and had it lined up. This was kind of played out later in the game. And now I wonder, does he stay at Carr, not play sports for 2 semesters, right? And then in December, he's done with everything, and he reclassifies and then can enroll a year earlier than he would have. So does he reclassify? I think yes. Is it going to be in December? I don't even know if they've got the answers to that yet. Or is it one where you wait until the end of the spring semester and find out that, okay, now he's gotten everything in line, he's taken his courses, maybe a couple more over the summer, and you're in. Again, this is kind of uncharted territory because I would say 90+% of kids who reclassify are also playing their junior season. It's while they do it, and whether that's a junior, senior year, whatever it is, they're playing. Not playing at all means that if he reclassifies, Matt, he will have gone to college having only have played his sophomore season, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not a ton of experience. It's something that Jahkeem had talked about previously as missing out on a year being a senior year of playing time. Now he's going to be missing out on 2 years of playing time. So he's got all the talent in the world. It's just a situation we have not seen many kids be in, to where by choice almost they've decided to transfer, sit out as a junior, and reclassify and skip a senior year. Something to monitor, obviously, daily here is we at least know a landing spot being Edna Carr.
The great news, of course, is that Jahkeem Stewart is staying in New Orleans with great ties to LSU. Teron Francis, you heard Shay mention, a class of 2025 at Edna Carr, already committed to LSU. 2 prospects for 2026, safety Aiden Hall, defensive lineman Richard Anderson, both committed to LSU for 2026. They're currently at Carr. It is a great sign for LSU. Yes, this is going to be an NIL game. Yes, I'm told USC, who, by the way, their defensive line coach is from New Orleans, has ties to the family. Oregon, who's very involved from the NIL space, are the other contenders. But LSU is in a really good position here. The one other thing to consider is the 2025 class from an NIL perspective. You've already got the number 1 player in the country committed in Bryce Underwood as part of 2025. You got a 5-star running back in Harlem Berry, a 5-star cornerback in DJ Pickett. You can add 5-star number 1 player in the country for 2026, reclassifying whatever it's going to take for NIL. LSU's going to have to open those coffers. We'll see if they can. But Shay did have one more follow-up on LSU's odds of landing Jahkeem Stewart.
I've always said that as long as he was in Louisiana, that LSU was going to be right there into the end. Obviously, this will be one where NIL comes into play, but LSU's fully aware of that. I think those 4 teams, yes, those are the ones. Now, he's visited 30 teams over the span of his recruitment. He's been recruited since he was in middle school. But this is, again, uncharted. I think that as we get closer to the December signing day, yes, we'll know more. But is that when he's signing? Does he sign in February? Does he hold out? There are just so many questions here. And remember, man, and you talk about in terms of ranking, he's not playing this year. He didn't play his freshman year either because he was ineligible. So if he's ineligible again this year, you've literally only played 1 year of high school football. That's a spot that almost no prospects have been in.
Pretty stunning and unprecedented situation. I'll remind you that Colin Hurley, the freshman quarterback at LSU right now, Hurley reclassified and was an early enrollee. So he finished high school in 2.5 years. He basically left high school at the midway point of his junior year to come participate in spring football at LSU this past spring. And he's currently a freshman at LSU after having enrolled early. Showed up on LSU's campus at 16 years old. So it's not unprecedented to have guys show up that early, but it is without playing your junior year of football and only playing 1 year of high school football. We'll follow. It's a major prospect that everybody in the country wants, and LSU is one step closer to landing. Of course, we'll have all the info right here on Locked On LSU. Hey, thanks for making us your first listen every day. And now go check out the Locked On College Football Podcast. It's linked in the description, so you don't even need to search for it. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, that'll do it for us here. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.